All right, welcome everyone to another edition of our Saturday evening show. I've got a nice big group here. We always start out with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. All righty, everyone. Mark, you want to just start off with a kind of thumbnail of how we're going to handle the show?
Sure. We thought we would start up with Larry sent us an email today uh, about the Sanders case, and I was hoping that he would be open to talking a little bit about it, to introduce people to a little bit of history and what that case and why it's important. Would you be open to that, Larry?
Yeah. Let's get started on it.
Sure.
Franklin Sanders is a gold and silver dealer. He now lives in the rural parts of Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, out in the middle of the farming country. He didn't start off that way. He started off in Memphis, Tennessee, as a gold and silver dealer. And of course, back in the early 70s, he was introduced to the tax movement. And he quickly got into trouble with the tax boys, both those that were collecting taxes on the sale of gold and silver coin, as well as the IRS. Back in the 80s, the IRS started this program to investigate people that were involved in what is called John Grambush's alternative to the Treasury, alternative to the Federal Reserve. They wanted to set up banks that dealt in gold and silver coin. So the way these entities worked is members would come in, join an organization, and they would turn the regular paychecks, their regular checks over to the organization. The organization would deposit those checks into the organization's bank account, commingling everything together. And the only way that anybody would know who had what was the books and records of the organization. You know, the money that you deposited into this joint account, your funds would be tracked by the bookkeeping records of the organization. This was called a warehouse bank. But or a bunch of these warehouse banks came under investigation by the IRS. Oh, this is a big tax protest organization. And so raids were conducted, and eventually a whole bunch of them, which includes Franklin Sanders and his warehouse bank, and Vernon Holland from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and his warehouse bank. So Franklin got indicted right around Christmas time, and after New Year's, one day he got picked up. He and his wife got picked up by the IRS. They got arrested. They were carried down to the local county jail in Memphis, Shelby County, such a nice place, Shelby County, Tennessee. And when Franklin went into his cell there after he was arrested, he just noticed a lot of his friends also in jail, including his pastor and assistant pastor. So, to make a long story short, there were 27 people that got indicted for this giant conspiracy. Oh, they were impeding the IRS. A whole bunch of them had, tax liens against them, and they joined this organization for the purpose of trying to defeat the IRS. Well, that trial, out of the 27 people that were indicted, 17 of them went to trial. The trial lasted about 5.5, 6 months. I forgot. I never really counted. It was so long, so living long. And then when the jury was out for I guess about 2 days. And out of the 52, well, there were more than 52 counts that the jury was to decide. But of those counts, everybody that stood trial was acquitted, and the total number of not guilty verdicts was 52. Now, about the same time, Vernon Holland, who had also been indicted with this group of people, in this warehouse bank scheme. I represented Franklin. Franklin was the lead defendant in that case. And in the Vernon Holland case, where there were only two defendants who went to trial, Jeff Dickstein represented Vernon Holland, who was the leader of his organization, and I represented his cohort, Dave Malden. And through 5 hot weeks in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we sat through that trial. And when the jury came back, after the jury was out for 3 days, and the judge declared a mistrial, um, the jury certainly knew where Vern's office was in Tulsa. Why? Because that's all they heard for about 5 weeks, where Vern's office was. So after we got out of court, when the judge declared a mistrial, we all went over to Vern's office. And a few minutes after that, 6 of the jurors came in and joined Vern's organization. So those are just, some of the good cases that have been won in the tax movement. But, I think the tax movement really needs to have a breath of fresh air. And I think it's time for the tax movement to be reinvigorated. But the way it's going right now, it's not getting reinvigorated. I don't know where the tax movement is going. And where the tax movement is going, I don't like it. I'm kind of really standing off from the tax movement.
For the
So,
sake of our group tonight, Larry, um,
well, I hope this group goes somewhere.
yeah, so do we, and I think that everybody here in this group and others and some of our Telegram chats, we're hoping to prove to you that we're behind all these efforts that you've put forth through the years, and we're trying to understand the complexity of the issues. And that's why we're having these meetings and everybody's donating their time along with yours, so that we can figure out a way to win this battle, especially in light of the new AI takeover or of legal environment. So uh, I think I speak for everybody, at least on this call and on my chat channel and Joe's as well, that we're not here to become gurus of your message. We're here to be followers and implementers of your message. It is my understanding that the hurdles at this point are due to the fact that there's specific environment where this issue should be brought to justice. And from our previous calls on the Zoom call, and I apologize to the newcomers, they will not be able to refer to what I'm talking about. But please bear with us, and you'll catch up with us later.
Well,
Uh,
what we find out who our attendees are today?
well,
Who's
we will find out.
for and who's new?
Some of them, but most of them are repeats, and that's what we're counting on to move forward, because they are already experienced in our meetings. They already know some of the teachings that you've provided for us for the past 6 months, and they already at least 30 or so of them have the thumb drive, and they're educated more or less in the thumb drive research. And we want to use this momentum to move forward. But the hurdle seems to be, and that's what I was going to say, that we cannot find people that are willing to do the fighting for the cause of the new tax honesty movement. That being, we could find the attorneys, we could find the money to finance these cases. But what you have encountered, from what I understand, is a circumstance whereby people like an employer employee that would directly benefit from taking these cases or their own circumstances to court do not understand the benefit of a summary judgment in a court of a state without an income tax. Do you want to address that at this point, or do we want
Well,
to?
I think you're a little too close to an issue. I think we need to back off a little bit because you kind of jumped into summary judgment in state court without there's a background to all that.
Very well.
There's a
It's up to you.
background to all that. You kind of were really close to an issue, and you need to back off a little bit so people understand it a little bit more.
Why don't you do that for us, Larry?
You know, to me, there's always been a need for some of these and a lot of these issues involving the tax issue to be actually litigated. And typically, rather than planning litigation, or litigation there is just happenstance, and it's beyond the control of the participants. Oh, it's initiated by the government. Oh, the government sued you in federal court over some federal issue related to tax, or they've indicted you. And to me, you know, I've got decades of experience in dealing with this, and I think sitting back and doing nothing is extremely bad. And there's plenty of opportunities for us to get together and do something right. But you know, it's been also been my experience that you know there's a desire on a lot of the promoters out there. You know, no, let's stay away from going into litigation. You know, they don't want to do that primarily because um, their organization is built on just bringing in people, and bringing in people doesn't necessarily mean you know the way that we're going to build an organization is go out and try to win some cases. No, they're building a membership, and to me that's a real problem. That's a lot of organizations fall in. There's a mistake that they make in the movement. They want to build an organization, and building an organization is the objective, rather than trying to win some battles, legal battles. And it's the legal battles that mean something. Now, for example, there never really has been, even though there have been a lot of people interested in it, um, even not even a concerted effort, not even interest in doing so, trying to raise and litigate withholding. And you know, there's a lot that can be done with a withholding issue. And I just think it would be real important for an organization to say, yes, we can plan some litigation to try to win on certain issues, which includes withholding. And you know, I'm not going to get down into the details because it'll damage some issues. Yeah, but I know damn well that there's a lot that can be done with litigating in state court the issue of withholding. And you would understand that. And one of the things we were going to do near the start of this meeting tonight was to deal with this issue of where can people go to get information, legal information, tax information. Where are those sources? Well, I want to cover that, but you know, in reference to if you go out and take a look, do a survey, do legal research, and see how often people have tried to, in an organized fashion, with a good research, bring up the issue of the validity, the application of wage withholding to the average American worker who's working here in the United States. There hasn't, you know, other than a bunch of people that have been involved in some um, criminal tax cases where the tax evasion was built upon, quote, evading income tax withholding. You know, you have those types of cases out there, but insofar as getting into the real meat of how withholding works, you know, one of the reasons why when we started these meetings Saturday nights, one of the things we did was to tell people, well, why don't you get this flash drive? Well, the flash drive has the tax acts on them. The flash drives also have the regulations that pertain to a particular income tax act. Like Regulations 65 deals with the Revenue Act of 1924, I think, off the top of my head. But virtually every 2 years, we got a new set of income tax acts when the income tax started off, and following along with that tax act, you had a new set of regulations. But it was it was organized. Now here we got a message from Cookie Rose to everyone. It's now off the screen. Was Cookie asking about this flash drive? Well, I kind of thought when the flash drive would become an item that people would buy as a result of attending these meetings, I thought there would also be an effort to look at them. But I think
It's actually on the screen, Larry. So they're looking. Joe allowed me to share the screen, so I had it posted on the screen for everybody to look at what the income tax regs CD is. This is what the flash drive uh, contains, and we have spoken about this in the last Zoom call, which was June
was several
27th.
times.
Right, several times. But last Zoom call, we started diving into it with more detail-oriented presentations, and we addressed, if everybody can see my cursor, we addressed this folder here that is called laws. I had a question, if you don't mind, before I jump there. People wanted to know, they see here Constitution exempt, and then the next one below it, it says exempt. Is there a difference between the folder Constitution exempt and the folder exempt? And if there is a difference, why is that
Well,
meaningful?
I didn't put those on that flash drive.
They are on the flash drive. They are on the income tax regs
Okay,
CD.
that item, but I haven't. Did you put that on there,
No,
or is that something I did?
those were
Is
on the
that the way it
flash
came
drive.
from me? Or I haven't looked at it in a long time. That's
Right.
Constitution exempt. That's just the places in the regulations, like pull up Regs 103, and that's probably 7 or 8 pages long.
Okay, this one here, right?
Oh, any one of them, any one of them,
Okay,
101,
you said
103,
103. Let me open
whatever.
103 just for exemplification for people. Okay, so this is regs 103, and I'm going to bring it because it opened in a different screen for me. I'm going to bring
It
it
hadn't opened up for us.
right. I know it's on a different screen here for me, so I have to bring it in. There it is. Right. So what are we looking here at? This is Regulation 103. What should people be searching for if they open this document or
Well,
this PDF?
exempt is nothing more. That's not anything you're looking for. It's just a bunch of PDF images from a
Right.
set of regulations where they're talking about, there's an odd feature of the regulations. And they're talking about some income being exempt under the Constitution. Well, what is that? And so this file here that has just pages from the statutes of law, I mean, from the Federal Register, and also the regulations, just virtually every 2 years, the tax acts, after the 16th Amendment was ratified, Congress would come out with a new tax act. So let's start off cleanly. Start off the first one that I like to use. There's a couple before that 1916, 1917. There's no benefit for somebody like the average American citizen digging into those tax acts. What is important is knowing something about the subsequent tax acts. The 1919 would it was enacted in 1919, but it was Revenue Act of 1918. But then we got 21, 24, 26, 28, 32, 34, 36, 38, and 39. And just knowing those, having access to those income tax acts and seeing how it just basically worked. If you have just looked at and because spent a couple of hours digging through these tax acts and seeing, how they were put together and just knowing some of their features, you don't have to really understand it. Just know how it's structured. You would be heads and shoulders above everybody inside the IRS and virtually all the tax lawyers in the United States. Why? Because the historical backgrounds for the income tax are ignored. And even in the tax movement, I have, I bring it up and people don't like me to bring it up. But, in knowing how the income tax was built, is very revealing, except it's unrevealing to those who believe that there's no benefit to looking at the old stuff. And so I just, when I run across somebody, well, gee, I don't want to have to do this. I just can reach the understanding that they're never going to really uh, get to the point where they really understand the income tax. And if you,
Well, the people on this call are willing to look at it. So we're looking at this Federal Register, Regs 103. And for example, somebody got
see,
the
this is just on a very specific little point.
good.
This
So
is
what
just
should we
where.
make of it? What should we make of it? Should I
Well,
do a
it's
search?
just because it was a very interesting point that showed up in all these regulations, talking about some income that's exempt pursuant to the Constitution.
So the highlight portion here is already highlighted for them on the thumb drive.
Right.
Okay.
And you're,
And
you're looking at this disk. Okay, I don't know, you either fold it over, drop it down, it'll delete it, get off this, go back to the folder that this came from.
count Constitution exempt
Yes,
right here.
yes. And to me, it's still on the screen.
Well, it came from Constitution exempt. So if I went to that folder in there, if you look on the left side, what I did, I split the screen into two so that we can relate in a hierarchical manner to what it is we're looking at on the right side. So on the left side, we have the income tax regs tax CD, right?
Yeah, and that
Tax regs.
folder
Okay.
exempt just is devoted to one specific thing
Let's
from
see what.
regulations.
Good. So let's go to exempt. I'm going to open the folder exempt. And this is what we
You already have
find.
one of them open.
So here on the left side, these are the contents of the folder exempt. Any particular one in here you wish me
No,
to
they're all
open?
they're all basically the same. Well, yeah, I'm sure as time goes by, they fudge with the language. But
Great.
I'm virtually I haven't gone back to compare, but I feel certain that everything, all the yellow highlights in all these folders called regs, read basically the same way,
Good.
except as time went along, there were more spots in the regulations where they were talking about these exempt this exempt income.
Great.
And
So here's
it's
what
just
I'm
so you
noticing.
have it
Here,
all in one spot. Well, gee, what is that? And I don't know what it is, but I think it's one of those things that, well, it's very interesting, and to me, there are other things that are a lot more important, but this is one of those little things. Why in the world is if the IRS says, it's all taxable, well, then why have you gotten all these regulations? And even today, in reference to corporations, this language is still around. Why? Why? But, that's just uh, uh, one little point that raises the question. What's really important is using and having a good understanding of the statutory foundation of the tax acts as well as the regulations. And all of these are PDF images. They're in Word, they're word searchable. So, one of the things, even if you don't have Adobe Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat has a feature where you can engage in word searches of PDF images. But even Adobe Reader has the ability to word search. So even though if you don't have Adobe Acrobat, with Adobe Reader, you can still engage in word searches. So one of these things that's beneficial is to pull up, say, like pull up Reg 74, and you want to do some searching for liable. And pull up one of these folders and do a word search for liable. Why don't you do that, Mark?
Doing that right now.
Section 74.
So on my computer, this document does not find anything for liable in Regulation 74. Could I do a search for something else?
Well, that would come up, but then that means you don't have Adobe Acrobat,
Well,
obviously.
I do, because when I do a search word, I find everything.
Well, you should with this
Okay.
because Adobe Acrobat will pick up any word searches in this file and all these files of the regulations.
Okay. So for example, I typed in gross income. Look at that. It popped up immediately. So maybe this Reg 74 does not address, in this particular PDF portion, does not have the word
Oh,
liable.
okay. All right. Yeah, you're right.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're right. You're right. I was
All
thinking
right.
about the acts themselves.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem.
Yeah.
However, what I've noticed is the Reg 103, which is going to show here in the folder exempt. I'm going to move the cursor slowly so you guys can see it. In the folder exempt of the CD, in the folder exempt, double click on exempt. I get Regs 103. This is what pops up. However, if I do the search in the folder Constitution exempt for the same Regs 103, this is what pops up. Okay. So it looks like you have done some selection for us, Larry, to help us look at the highlighted most important items to kind of narrow down our research. That's what it looks like to me. This is only 3 pages here, or 4 pages, that you have selected
Well,
from.
this concept in this yellow highlighted part of the regulations, this concept, there are certain things exempt pursuant to the Constitution. You can see how far back it goes. Regulations 45, those were the regulations for the 1918 Act, adopted in 1919. So all I did was, hey, this is important. It might be interesting to people. It's not anything that I find anything. It's interesting. I don't make anything particularly of it, because to me my arguments are built on something else. However, for people like our attendees, they might have some real questions. Well, gee, why in the world are they talking about this income that's fundamentally exempt pursuant to the Constitution? What is that? And
So I have a,
somebody might want to dig into that. And if you want to dig into it, you got a whole lot of legal information here available from this organization that enable you to do that.
I got a thought as you were saying this, a suggestion. So we have these attendees. Looks like we have a tremendous participation, 38 people tonight. But there's at least 30 people that I know of that got the thumb drives thus far. Why don't we, next Saturday or whenever you're available, why don't we ask these people that have the thumb drives to put together a list of their own questions, send them to me on Noma Stacks. I'll put together a list of their questions after or as they study these things and they have confusions or questions or particular points of interest about what it is they're studying, and we address those according to their participation, because otherwise what we're doing, we might find ourselves repeating ourselves about the same issues over and over because we don't get any feedback as far as their participation, their study, and how far they got. For example, last time we were in the laws folder, and I'm going to open the laws folder. Here we have addressed the 1919 Income Tax Act, and you talked about it, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
We did that last time, and we had a wonderful presentation pertaining. You had a great expose of why liable is the key element in studying the bridge between IRS requests for tax returns in section 6001, 6011, and where that is linked to the statutes through the word liable. And that was very clear for everybody. And I made that available well, on Joe's Zoom. He already has the part one, and we explained that very nicely. But then we had Kit come in and ask specifically about, okay, we have the statutes, we have the regulations. Where do the Treasury decisions come in? Are they of any importance? Are they important? And how can we find the Treasury decisions? Because they learned that somewhere in several Treasury decisions, Form 1040 from other sources, Form 1040 is identified as to be filed only by non-resident aliens, foreign corporations, or withholding agents for such entities. Would that be a correct statement? How do they know? Can you help us figuring that thing out?
Well, the regulations that are on the screen, they were law. And when the Income Tax Act came out, like let's say 1916, the Congress would come along and say, well, the Secretary has the authority. By this time, starting in the 1880s and 1890s, the issue of regulations and their validity was being raised in the court until it finally went to the Supreme Court. And we got the word from the Supreme Court as to, what's the legal import of these things that we're calling these regulations. So once we had that decided, Congress started coming along, and like for these acts, like here, these tax acts, they would authorize the Secretary of the Treasury and the Commissioner of Internal Revenue to sit down and then tell the people by means of some regulations how they construed the Income Tax Act. So the set of regulations would be a lot more explanatory. They would be the people that were enforcing it were telling by means of the regulations, hey, this is the way we're going to enforce this. This is what we think it means. This is the way we're going to enforce it. This is the meaning we're going to give to these tax acts. And those were the regulations. So what we have here on this act, this CD, is something that nobody's ever put together. I think it's very beneficial. I think it's real important for the people to have access to the actual tax acts. And they are more than, hey, most of the gurus in this movement will come along and say, we don't want to learn this stuff.
We do. We want to learn this. Yeah.
But it's real unfortunate. I just encounter these people that said, no, we don't need to look at this. They're lazy.
So no, we're not
And
lazy,
it is real important for people to understand there's a flow. I'll start with the Revenue Act of 1918 and go up through the 39 and seeing how it was built. And seeing how something is built is very, very educational. It's very educational to see how the income tax was built.
Agree. So we have these laws here. So this is a folder laws, right? You see that where my cursor is? Laws on the left side, my cursor.
Tax acts.
Okay, right. So those are tax acts. Now, those are tax acts. They're not regulations. So if they want to peg regulation to those tax acts, which folder should they look at? Miscellaneous, other regulations, regulation
okay,
one?
like the regulations 45, there were two sets of them, one in 1918, one in 1920. But
So
regs,
you're talking
regs,
about this here and this here, right?
yeah.
Okay,
But that
stay with
dealt
me.
with, this was dealing with the 1918 Act adopted in 1919. Reg 62, Reg 65, Reg 69, Reg 64. These are all subsequent tax acts. Every 2 years, you have Congress comes out in 1918, Revenue Act 1919, 21, 24, 26. Those are revenue acts in those years. They were income tax acts. And then there's a change, and this is real important. All the other in the period of 21 through 2026, you had four acts in there, and they were all basically the same. I was just befuddled. Why in the world didn't Congress do what they typically do? If they're coming out with an act that they don't make any changes into a section, they leave it alone, and they just come out with amendments to other sections of a law. That didn't do that. What they did is they came out with whole new acts. So that's something to look at and understand. But these
Sure.
virtually every 2 years, Congress would come out and expand, improve, and these little changes, these little progressions, little improvements in the act, something you need to know about. It's not all that difficult. There's not all that many of them. And then you
Larry,
have the
what I'm
increase.
trying to do, I'm sorry, just but
Okay,
you're
go
losing
ahead.
me. You're losing me because you see, I'm looking at this screen here, and I know that people have the thumb drives, and they got a tremendously powerful locomotive without tracks, if you know what I mean by that. So I'm opening this, and I don't know what to do with this information if I'm a newcomer to this study. I see laws. When I click on laws, I see stats, income tax stats. So these are all laws. And in my mind's eye, as a beginner, these are
Well,
statutes.
the question becomes,
Let me
this is
finish.
a lot.
Let me finish, please, so I can formulate a question. Then you'll be able to answer. So I see stats. I don't see regulations. So you say these are acts. Now, these regulations somehow, if you look at these, somehow relate to these laws. And I don't know how to link them. And that's what I'm kind of hoping that you can help us.
Well,
Uh,
I've done that.
okay, let's do that
Yeah,
again
like
because,
the Revenue Act of 1919,
okay, tell me which one to click on. Do you see this on your screen?
Well, I thought it was kind of organized on the CD.
It is organized on the CD, but connecting this folder, I'm looking at Regulation 65, for example. I double click
Well,
on it.
I got Mark. I could have just stuck all the regulations in one folder and not put Reg 65, Reg 66, all these regs. I've stuck them in folders so they would be in yellow, so that then as time goes by, maybe people's heads will be accustomed to seeing these regs. Otherwise,
Got
I
it.
just stuck them all in one folder.
Good.
Wouldn't mean
So
anything.
Mark, this is
this,
Mel.
However, there's a set of regulations for each set of the tax acts. So that's
Mark,
it.
Mark, can you hear me? Let me interrupt.
we will, Nelda, let me finish and I will
No,
let you
no,
in,
no.
please.
You guys
I
are
will let you
you
in.
guys
I will let you in.
you're
Nelda, I will let you
confusing.
in.
There's an
I will let you
HTML
in.
file.
Nelda, I will let you in. Please stop. Don't interfere right now. Larry, I got Treasury Decision 3640 at the top right here in this document. You see that on the right side? It says
Yeah.
TD 3640. Kit was asking last meeting, how do I know where to look for TD 3640 to find it in Regulation 65 PDF? That's what people do
Prejudice,
not
that's just the
know.
name of that set of regulations. Now, there's
Good.
another set of books you can get. You can download it on the internet. I
Good.
don't have the link right handy, but there are all these historical books from the Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service. All Treasury decisions were. And let's go back to after the Civil War, and there was a lot more activity at the federal level. And, you have people that are um, working in tax collection. And they had some questions, just the people that were working there. So there was a newsletter that came up. And that newsletter would spread around information for those that are working in, say, like customs duties. And so it became obvious as time goes by, particularly after the Civil War, that things are getting a little bit more complex, and there needs to be a little bit more in the way of official communications, at least to people that are working in the Treasury Department or working with the collection of taxes, to have their questions answered. For example, do the dolls from France bear the same tariff as the dolls from Great Britain? And it's one thing to look at the statute and say, blah blah blah, but it's another for the Commissioner of Internal Revenue or other high officials who have already looked into it and say, well, this specific set from this manufacturer right here is taxable, and this set over there is not taxable because sometimes the tax was dependent upon how much cotton was in the product. And some products had more cotton and therefore higher taxable than other products that had less cotton, for which there might not be any tax. So it became very kind of specialized, or a need for specialization. So then soon, the Treasury Department started issuing Treasury Decisions and publish them one right after another. And they publish them in books. And those books are now, they used to years ago. I am looking at up in my library here in my office. I got tired of running to the law library, and I found that there was a law publisher. And I bought a whole set of old books that started off in 1895 and goes up to 1941. Just one set of books. I sat out and read them. So, you have to just, based on experience, know where, historically, because you've done digging into it. You've seen these books, and you go to these books to get answers. And all these books contain